There was nothing in the board documents, so I just worked with Carolyn to take out some things from there.
We got rock.
Thursday night, we're gonna paint some rocks.
I thought we had a collection from Crop Walk last week.
No, last week was the crop walk.
Oh, I see.
And so we didn't take up a special collection. The Social Justice Committee asked to do it today.
I also had down the monthly meditation to remind people what's coming up on the fourth Wednesday.
Good morning. I'm Herb Heathcote. I'm on the Board of Trustees. I'm happy to do the announcements this morning. We have several things coming up. Today, we have a special collection for Crop Walk. Last week, there was a group from Cedars that went on the Crop Walk, and so today our special collection is for the Crop Walk. On Wednesday, the Spiritual Writing Group is meeting at Cedars Center at 5 p.m. This month, they'll be reflecting on befriending solitude and grief. On Thursday, October 12th, at 5 p.m. at the Cedars Center, we have rock painting to prepare the rocks that will be used in the October 29th All Souls Day service. So you're welcome to come and paint rocks on Thursday. Next Sunday, we'll have a special service, brunch and banter, led by Nancy Phillip. And so you can join for gathering, sharing meals, hymns, and meaningful conversations. Next, bring a dish to share, yes. That's the part of the brunch part. And finally, Cedars, in partnership with Kol Shalom, offers Super Supper dinners on the last Tuesday of each month. But this month, Eagle Harbor Church will be using the community room for a Halloween event on that last Tuesday. And so we've been shifted this month only to Sunday. So we'll be serving Super Supper on Sunday, October 29th. You can find more information in the Beacon or contact Mike Cox about the Super Supper. Thank you.
So I have this thing sometimes when I notice things sitting around for a long, long time, I want to make use of them. Those of you who are regular attendees, you may notice we have some colored orders of service today. There has been colored legal paper sitting in our office since sometime before I came here in 2019 that I decided I would make use of. And in doing that, inspire a new way to connect. So each of you, I hope that the distribution worked out well, that we're not sitting next to people who have the same color order of service. But I want to invite us to greet one another. But how I want to do this, I have an extra. Oops, I'm going to twist my ankle. How I want to do this is whatever color order of service you have, take a moment to find someone else with that same color and go over and greet them. Welcome them into this space. Say hello, hear how they're doing. That's us. Hey, how's it going? All right, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to this space. I invite you to wrap up your greetings. You know, one of the great things about taking the time to check in and greet one another is sometimes you realize that there's maybe something missing. For instance, Rebecca and I were just checking it, and we realized there's a slight mistake in the order of service today. After the sermon, we will be singing a final hymn today. We'll announce it when we get there. It's hymn number 34, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire, which I'm glad we had a chance to check in and greet each other and figure that out. So welcome.
That worked out.
I invite you to take a breath now, to settle yourself in this moment. As I share these words from Transformation of Silence into Language and Action by Audre Lorde. She writes, I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. That the speaking profits me beyond any other effect. Your silence will not protect you. We have been socialized to respect fear more than our own need for language and definition. And while we wait in silence for that final luxury of fearlessness, the weight of that silence will choke us. And while we wait in silence for that final luxury of fearlessness, the weight of that silence will choke us. End quote. I believe each of us has some secret truth of ours within us that we long to speak and have heard. Something within us that is essential to who we are, that we long to have seen, to see and be seen in the presence of one another. And so in that spirit, I invite us to bring the fullness of who we are into this service, the fullness of our identity into this space, that we might share it with one another to see and be seen. Come, let us worship together.
In the fall of 1979, as I entered my senior year of high school, I found a fast friend in college prep literature, second period. I sat right behind him, and he turned around dozens of times each day to roll his eyes at some comment the teacher made, or make a small joke or a sarcastic remark. He was incredibly quick-witted, funny, and smart. His name was Dominic Rashigno, and high school life quickly improved once we started hanging out on a regular basis. One day, kind of late in the fall, very casually, in the middle of class, Dominic turned around and said, "I lost my virginity last night." I asked him who it was, and he said, "A guy who lives on Capitol Hill. I met him after dance class." This was the first time someone had come out to me, and I felt a deepening of our friendship after he trusted me as a witness to his life-altering milestone. I've had LGBTQI plus people in my life from a very young age. My mom was in musical theater when I was a kid, so our house was frequently filled with singers, dancers, actors, and musicians from all over Seattle. Trust me, these folks are fun. So when I entered high school, it made sense that I would gravitate toward the very familiar theater crowd to find my people. And just like my mother's friends, many of my core high school crew were gay. Naturally, Dominic was part of this group, along with our friends Lynn Hickenbottom, Craig Fizet, Janine Quammen, Janine Matt, and Rod Bradshaw. 3 of us were straight, and everybody else was gay. Some of us were not theater people, but knew that hanging out with the actors was a safe bet for meeting kindred spirits who would travel the perilous path of high school as a group and provide the community needed to get us all to graduation and our separate college and career paths. Having this group made high school fun when it could be and bearable when times got tough, and they did get tough. We are all still really good friends, and all but one still lives in the Northwest. And Dominic passed away in 2005. The one thing that I remember about my queer friends in high school is this. There are a lot of things I remember about our experience back then, but here's what I really remember. These guys already had their identities figured out. And because they already knew their sexual preferences, every one of them was really comfortable in their own skin. It's kind of like they had that part of it down, so they didn't have to think about that anymore. And I don't know if it's because they had the added task of announcing their sexual identity to the world, because I don't have to tell people, I don't have to announce my sexuality to the world. It would sound ridiculous. And I think that's because straight, white, female, cis, able-bodied is considered the baseline, and we're working on that. We're working on changing that. But these friends of mine, they knew who they were, or at least had one very important piece of their identity figured out. Not everyone gets to their sexual orientation this early, and everyone has their own timeline for self-realization and announcing to the world. It takes decades for some. A few lucky, well-supported, and well-loved individuals come to the realization at a very early age. My high school friend Janine Matt wrote this a few years back for Pride Month. I was 5, and we had just moved to an apartment in the U District, and I was really lonely as we had been there for weeks, and there were no kids anywhere. One day, I was on the porch, and I looked over, and standing in the yard was this beautiful little Japanese girl. No shirt, just shorts and this beautiful kimono. She was standing there staring at me. She said, "Hi, I'm Ricky." And then she outstretched her arms, threw her head and long black hair back, and started twirling round and round like a whirling dervish with her kimono flying like wings. It was as if she was in slow motion. Time stood still. She was freedom and joy incarnate. It was then and there that I knew I would forevermore be in love with girls. I dedicate the lighting of the chalice to all those who are coming out today or any day. We see you, we hear you, we celebrate you. Please join me in reciting the affirmation in our order of service. As we come together to worship, remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because they are our brothers, to take good care of the earth and to live in a home, and to live lives full of love and goodness, because that is how we will all become the best we can be. Please join us. Stand as you're willing and able, and join us for hymn number 188, Come, Come.
Okay, so hymn number 188, and this is a round. So we're going to sing it all together one time through, and then I'm going to lead group 1, which I guess will be y'all over here. And Alan's going to lead group 2, which will be you all, and we'll sing it through as around 3 times.
Part of being in community, part of feeling like you are really in community and seen in that community is also being heard. So I want to invite us into a practice of listening. But we're going to take all of the intellectualization of listening, all of those words, and just for a moment set them aside. We're going to play with sound. So I'm going to make some sounds, and first what you're going to do is just repeat my sounds as best you can. Do whoop. Let's try it. Do whoop. Do do. Do. Okay. I said no words. Now, in your own head, think of a sound, any sound. It can be inspired from the ones we just made together, and turn to someone near you, and on the count of 3, make your sound. 1, 2, 3. It's kind of fun. So, okay, we're going to try this now. I'm going to make a sound, and I want you to match me. And we're going to just keep that sound going. If you have to take a breath and jump right back in. So, that was it. Just kidding. It's like a volume control. It seems silly, I'm sure. But there's something about removing the words, the intellectualization, as I said, and taking a moment to just play with listening to each other that connects us. It brings us joy in a very simple way. And so I offer this as a potential practice you might take up in your life. To find those places where you can play with listening. To maybe find those places where you can synchronize with the sounds around you. And to feel what it's like to just be part of the soundscape in which we all exist. And that is our time for all ages. Before offering the words of our centering moment today, I do want to pause and lift up the conflict that is currently happening in Israel and Palestine. This is a complicated conflict, as many are. And at this time, just to hold the hope for peace in our hearts and for the world needs more peace. Blessed be the light within. Blessed be the light among us. Blessed be the light that shines around us. Blessed be the light in all. These words come from J. Holme. Blessed are the outcasts, the ostracized, the outsiders. Blessed are the scared, the scarred, the silent. Blessed are the broken, for they are not broken. Blessed are the hated, for they are not worthy of hate. Blessed are those who try, those who transform, those who transition. Blessed are the closeted. God sees you shine anyway. Blessed are the queers who love creation enough to live the truth of it, despite a world that tells them they cannot. And blessed are those who believe themselves unworthy of blessing. What inconceivable wonders you hold. Blessed be the light within. Blessed be the light among us. Blessed be the light that shines around us. Blessed be the light in all. Amen.
Share your joys with us so we can celebrate with you. Share your sorrows with us so you don't have to bear them alone. If you have a joy or sorrow, please come forward, give us your name, and briefly share your joy or sorrow. Put a stone in the water for your sorrow and some water in the bowl for your joy. This portion of the service is neither live streamed or recorded. sorrows that go unspoken, and a little bit of water in the bowl for the joys that remain in our hearts. And now we have a hymn.
So this is our hymn of the month, For All That Is Our Life, number 128. If you would like to join me in standing as you're willing and able.
So, while you're digging those $50 bills out of your wallets, just a suggestion, I will read some Harvey Milk quotes. I will never forget what it was like coming out and having no one to look up toward. If you help elect more gay people, that gives a green light to all who feel disenfranchised, a green light to move forward. Give me your support, and I will fight for you. I stand for all those who feel that the government no longer understands the individual and no longer respects individual rights. There are people I might have loved had they gotten on the airplane or run down the street after me. The more people open their hearts to us, the less we will have to fight for our rights. And these quotes were made 30 years ago, and they're still relevant today. So, will the ushers please come forward for the offering? Yeah. Thank you for your generous gifts.
Gotta get back to my spot. Before I spend an extended period of time talking, I'd like to warm my voice up a little bit more with all of you. And if we could sing our opening hymn again. And if you know it, you join in. And if you don't, just feel free to listen and follow along until you feel like you can join in. Or just listen. Come. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Okay, changing gears now. Peekaboo! I see you. Peekaboo! I see you. Have you ever experienced that joy of playing a game of peekaboo with a young child? And just witnessed that pure joy that spreads across their face. I think of it as just unadulterated joy. Joy so carefree and pure that in that very moment of peekaboo, that's all there is for that child. Eyes widening as cheeks fold into dimples and maybe a squeal fills the air and then fades. How many of you have ever experienced this? Just raise your hands. I'm not going to brag, but I'm an uncle many times over, and I would like to think that I'm pretty good at playing peekaboo at this point. Not only do I find this game to be incredibly fun and easy to play, but I found it to be a simple way to establish a relationship early on. Realizing this, I've often wondered why. Why is this simple game of peekaboo so good at establishing a positive relationship? And thinking about this is what I've come up with. I think that what it is that helps establish that positive connection in playing peekaboo has something to do with the suddenness of realizing that someone else is seeing you. That in that very moment, unexpectedly, peekaboo, you are seen. From our earliest moments on this planet, we all hold a desire to be seen, to be in connection with people, or to somehow be perceived in a positive way that affirms our existence and relationship with others. Not seen in a threatening or violent way, but in a way that causes our face to crease into a smile and maybe even a laugh to slip past our lips. Or if not that, to at least feel affirmed. In psychotherapy, therapists are encouraged to engage their clients from a place of unconditional positive regard. This relational dimension, as it's practiced, was first proposed by Stanley Stadol in 1954 and was later expanded on by one of his colleagues, Carl Rogers, in the late 1950s. Not all psychologists, not all therapists endorse this approach of unconditional positive regard. But for those who do, the underlying theory is that fostering a relationship based in unconditional positive regard helps people to recognize their own inherent value, and as a result, access or develop the internal resources necessary for personal growth. Sounds very Unitarian Universalist, to affirm that inherent worth and dignity as a way of helping us access tools for further growth. There's something so powerful about having a space and time to speak and be heard without judgment. But not all spaces are as affirming and as touchy-feely as a 50-minute therapy session. But even in the cases where we aren't affirmed, I still believe that there is a deep power. No, it's actually a life-giving power in speaking the truth and being authentic to who we are and letting others know. As Audre Lorde wrote in the quote I opened with, "I have come to believe over and over again that the most important things to me must be spoken, made verbal and shared, even at the risk of it being bruised or misunderstood. That the most important things to me must be spoken, even if they're bruised or misunderstood." If you were here last Sunday, you might have remembered me saying that we oftentimes sacrifice our authenticity on the altar of acceptability. But the thing about making such a sacrifice, as Audre Lorde points out, is that by making this sacrifice, we are not protecting ourselves. Your silence will not protect you. We have been socialized to respect fear more than our own needs for language and definition. And while we wait in silence for that final luxury of fearlessness, the weight of that silence will choke us. We all eventually do face death. It's part of what makes life, I think, so mysterious and wonderful and precious. But facing death prematurely, as I know that many of you have experienced in your lives, having a loved one die suddenly by tragic cause, facing death prematurely is cruel. It comes and leaves us feeling incomplete, unsettled, and without closure. It is violent. I believe the same sort of violence comes. The same death is at play when we hide a part of our true selves out of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of misunderstanding, or even fear of the assumptions that others will make. When we hide out of fear and make ourselves a place apart, when we hide behind walls and put up barriers, we experience a small taste of this premature death. Only in this case, in the case of this death by lack of disclosure, we have a choice. As long as we are still alive, we have a possibility of resurrection from this death. Robert Frost once wrote in a poem that I've quoted from this pulpit many, many times, that we make ourselves a place apart behind light words that tease and flout, but oh, the agitated heart till someone really find us out. But oh, the agitated heart till someone really find us out. That agitation, that anxiety based in fear of disclosure is the death that I am talking about. It might not be a literal death, but as we know, metaphors can be just as powerful as force in our lives. We build our lives around them. Words are a shaping force, and the lack of words describing our truth can be just as shaping of a force. The lack of words can also shape us. To speak and let our true selves be known and reverse the death that silence brings. This is something that members of the LGBTQ plus, or as I like to now call them, the alphabet mafia, came to realize some 25 or 35 years ago in 1988. And that's why National Coming Out Day came to be. The founders of National Coming Out Day started this event, this occasion, with the belief that homophobia thrives in an atmosphere of silence and ignorance, and that once people know that they have loved ones who are gay or lesbian, they are far less likely to maintain a homophobic or oppressive view. The foundation of the coming out movement was based on a life-saving disclosure. If you think about what was happening in 1988 in the LGBTQ community around the world, the AIDS crisis and the lives that were being lost, they knew that their disclosure and choice to come out to face that fear was life-saving, and so they did it. I know that in my life, some of the most profound and transformational relationships that I have experienced are the ones where I feel that I can truly be myself. Those friends that I don't even hesitate to share the hard things with. It's not everyone. I think there's levels of disclosure appropriate to different environments. But I know that in those places where I can be authentic, I experience life. In those spaces, I give up my silence as a way of protecting myself, instead of hoping that my silence will protect me, which Audre Lorde reminds us that it will not. I want to take a moment and share an extended passage from a friend and colleague of mine, the Reverend Adrian Graham. And this comes from a reflection on coming out that Adrian wrote in 2019. Adrian writes, "I spent an entire year brooding over whether and when to come out to my family. I had a little practice with some close friends in college, and later with a few friends that I kept in touch with from high school. Looking back on the experience now, I can almost laugh at myself, or at least smile. The first few times I essentially announced, after much beating around the bush, that Adrian is not straight. That was the most direct I had ever been in my entire life at that point. Before we got to that point, though, one of my friends tried to clue the others in with a metaphor that began something like, well, there are apples, there are apple trees and there are orange trees. In hindsight, watching them try to figure out what the heck she was talking about was hilarious. But at the time, I could not find my laughter. I was consumed with fear. And all I could think was, what if they reject me? Coming out to my family may have been one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. In the end, I realized that my choice was one of life and death, and I needed to let my secret out in order to continue living. And I needed to let my secret out in order to continue living, and to do so authentically." Revelation, disclosure, truth. Later this week, on the 11th, is the 35th observance of National Coming Out Day. For many of you, I know that 35 years is not a long time, but for me, it's actually my entire life. I turned 35 last month, and so there's a few weeks there where National Coming Out Day wasn't a thing. But for my entire life, this observance has been held. It's kind of cool to think about that here I stand as an openly gay 35-year-old minister preaching this sermon in a church. I think many people, even in Unitarian Universalist spaces 35 years ago, would have wrestled with that. Not every queer kid, not every trans kid, not every gay or lesbian kid or child who is just a little bit different in some way can say they had this same experience. Earlier this week, in a conversation with a friend, I was also reminded that this coming week, on October 12th, Thursday, it marks 25 years since University of Wyoming student Matthew Shepard was brutally killed and left to die, or brutally tortured and left to die because of his identity. I see some heads nodding, and still to this day, I think about that, and I tear up. And that was 25 years ago, 10 years after National Coming Out Day had already begun. And this young man's life was still taken because of his identity. How could things have been different if the world was more open, more accepting? If we approached each other with that same sort of unconditional positive regard that therapists strive for? How could it have been different? The thing about progress and the way that social issues move and societies move is that it is not always linear. Timelines circle back on each other, and sometimes we move forward and back, and it's just this constant conversation. But one thing I do believe, despite the way that progress works, is I believe that vulnerability and authenticity, that truth begets truth. Vulnerability begets vulnerability. Authenticity begets authenticity. When we are true and honest with ourselves and each other, we invite others into that space. When we are authentically and joyfully who we are, we give others permission to enter that same space. So this National Coming Out Day, whether you're part of the alphabet mafia or not, I invite you to take time to reflect on that essential part of yourself, that thing within you that you've always wanted to bring out and let shine. And see if in small ways you can make a move to bringing it out, make a move towards disclosure. Even if you are not part of that alphabet mafia community, your vulnerability, your disclosure gives others permission. And I believe that that, coupled with the affirmation and the worth and dignity of every person, saves lives. This is our spiritual practice as Unitarian Universalists. This is our life practice. This is the truth that we are being called to the glory of life. In closing, I'd like to invite us to please rise as you are willing and able as we prepare to sing our closing hymn of the day. This is the one that got omitted in the order of service. Hymn number 34, though I may, or 38. 34, okay, gosh. 34, though I may speak with bravest fire.
Please repeat after me as I extinguish the flame of our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. The warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I want to invite us one more time to sing together in a call and response song. And it's not in our hymnal, but it comes up a lot. You may know it. So I will sing a line and invite you to sing it back to me. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. For those gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks. It's with gratitude that I end our service. Our service has ended, but our service to the world and one another begins anew. May we go forth inspired and knowing that we are supported in being who we are authentically called to be. May it be so.